Everybody. It's a beautiful morning. Nice to see everybody here. Um, I practice mostly in tax litigation. I have another practice as well dealing with charities and not-for-profits. Um, but the interesting thing about dealing with tax litigation is that you get to see things kind of from at the end of a disaster, trying to clean up the mess. And when I heard of the theme for the conference being the untied from the chair kind of an idea, it occurred to me that perhaps the most important thing I can give you is the perspective at the end. What happens after the end of a disaster? Because typically, if somebody gets involved in financial problems, you don't get untied from the chair. You just got to work longer in order to be able to pay off your debts or fund your retirement. So really, from my perspective, getting untied from the chair means also being prudent and acting fiscally responsibly. I don't mean to sound like an election poster through through your career. And again, one of the things that I wanted to give you was this kind of impression about some of the problems that I have seen in my practice, mostly from dentists. With the presentation focuses on dentists. That's not to say most problems come from dentists. From there, I hope you'll get a sense of again, some of the problems that you may face and some of the pitfalls to avoid. I made it in this slightly because my colleague Tanya Carlton worked for many years in a dental office, so she's probably seen things from the other side, and hopefully you'll get the idea. Now, this is not intended to be entirely humorous. But it is kind of a heavy topic, and so we presented it a little bit in a lighter mood so that nobody gets depressed. that's the idea. So go ahead. And I've never done this Prezi. This is Prezi, not PowerPoint. So I've never done this before, and you'll excuse me if if we don't get it perfect. So this is our fellow in here. As you can see, he's a dentist, and he's go over here, and our dentist friend is busy working on his income taxes. And here he is. He's got his random number income for 2015, $500,000. So that part's great. So what this client of ours did was basically he skimmed $100,000 off the top. He said, listen, I pay a lot of taxes to the government. I'm not interested in paying any more. I'm just going to take $100,000 and not claim it, and no one will be the wiser. I'll tell you at the end how we resolved these various things, because this poor fellow couldn't sleep at night. And I've had other clients that have done similar things, self-employed people, that felt very concerned that they were going to jail. And so they come to us in tears and say, you know what, I've got children, I don't want to go to jail, what do I do? And I'll tell you in the end how we resolve that. But go ahead and click the button. Okay, here's another fellow. This was a wonderful dentist here. I don't know if you know him, but most dentists have noses. That I can assure you. So this fellow also said, listen, I pay a lot of money in tax, and I hate it. I'm not interested in paying all this money in tax. What can I do? What is a tax shelter? So he met this fellow over here who looks like really reputable and responsible, and he told him all about this tax shelter. Apparently this tax shelter involved a volcano on an island somewhere. And he said, want to invest in my tax shelter? He says, sounds good, I'd like to invest. Now, tax shelters are not by definition bad, okay? There's nothing, you can't say never invest in a tax shelter, because some tax shelters are designed to encourage investment in certain areas of society. However, there was a rash of charitable donation tax shelters which caught large swaths of people, primarily higher to middle income, middle to higher income earners that got involved in these things. And then the CRA went and disallowed the donation receipts that were the reason people got involved. And of course, they were out of pocket this big bag of gold that they gave to that smarmy fellow over there. So again, I'll discuss some of the solutions at the end, but if we can move forward to our next fellow. Okay, so this is another typical problem which happens with self-employed people. I run our firm. every paycheck, I got to take off source deductions from everyone in the firm. I have to send them on to the government. I need to remit my HST, and need to make tax installments. The problem with all this is it really requires a lot of discipline, especially when you run into a cash flow problem. The first thing people want to do is they want to take the money that they're supposed to send on to the CRA. And I can tell you that this is a problem across all areas of people that are self-employed. Our fellow over here, you can click that button, so he knew that the 30th was tax installment day, but he wanted to. He scratched it out and took the money to go to Montego Bay. And this is a problem. Usually they're not taking the money to go and fritter away, but it's usually a problem with cash flow, and that's why we call the CRA the country's largest creditor, because what happens is the first person you screw really is the CRA. After that, things kind of fall apart, and especially when you deal with GST and HST, those amounts are trust amounts. The government, and source deductions, the government will not let up. That money is owed to the government as soon as it's withheld. And it's a very difficult problem, because on top of that comes interest and penalties. And as soon as you stop remitting on time, the government comes back at you with a huge bill, not just for the taxes owed, but the interest and the penalties. And the interest alone can ruin a lot of people. And we have ways we deal with that as well. All right, so this dentist was, again, somebody self-employed. And this, again, is a problem that touches all sorts of self-employed people. The example I'm showing you, I could tell you it had it specifically with a dentist. We have dentists run their own businesses. Many of them, just like many others do, they have a credit card. They say, well, you know what, maybe I'll use the business credit card, and maybe they're buying supplies for the business. That's fine, and they can deduct those. Maybe they throw a Diet Coke on there because, hey, it's Staples sells them now. So they throw on a Diet Coke and they drink it. But the problem comes in when they start doing other things. She's dressed very fancily. She's got, I don't know if you can see jewelry down here. She buys the Thinker, Rodin sculpture, scuba gear. Go ahead. I think that's supposed to be a trip. Las Vegas. She bought, all sorts of things that are not business expenses, and running them through and deducting them. Very little I can do to help this kind of situation, but I'll explain to you the difficulties and why, what we did and how we handled it to the best of our ability under the circumstances. All right, so this was a bizarre situation we had when we had to deal with two dentists that were involved in a business. What they did is, dentists have a lot of cash. And what happened was they opened up, I think it was a gym. They got involved in a gym, like a fitness facility kind of thing. And the dentist came along and said, here's cash. Basically, they just transferred money out of their account. Guy said, here, thank you very much. I'll get you a receipt. And our dentist said, oh, don't worry about it. Just here's the money. Okay? The problem with this is CRA came along and said, okay, it may be entirely valid. The business failed. They took all the deductions they could. It was called an ABLE. They wrote it off against their income. It was huge money they gave, $1 million, huge, huge money. And they had no paperwork to substantiate that they made these contributions to the business. And so CRA says, everything may be fine. You may have done everything legitimately. We just need proof. And our dentist friends had none. And I'll tell you, this particular situation brings to mind an example I probably should have brought up in the beginning when we were discussing getting untied from the chair. We have clients, I see their tax returns, right? That they come to me with a problem, I ask to see their tax returns, I see how much they make. We have dentists that make in excess of $1 million a year gross, okay, that are discussing bankruptcy because they've been involved in so many different projects. The CRA is closing in on them, and they can't retire because they're in their 60s. I mean, they cannot retire because of the CRA, not because they can't sell their practice, not because their reputation is bad, because they've been involved in bad business deals, and they simply don't have a choice because it's the CRA that's coming after them, not even other people. And that's why it's so critical to dot your I's and cross your T's when you're dealing with all of these kind of issues. And it's sheer stupidity to say, no, it's okay, I don't need any documents to substantiate that I've given you cash for a business. Absolute nonsense. Anyways, go ahead. Now, this is a situation which many of you might know. It happened here in Ottawa. It involved a dentist, and I thought it prudent to discuss. There's a group of people in this country that believe that the CRA does not have the constitutional authority to tax you, and therefore they don't pay taxes. There was a dentist, this lady here's a dentist, and she made the paper. So you can click the button.
Can I just interrupt? Just out of,
Yeah?
I worked with her with that.
Oh, did you? So you know that she was handcuffed in her office and dragged out of her office. And I'll tell you something. It doesn't matter, okay? It doesn't matter if the government has constitutional authority to tax you or not. They've got guns and handcuffs. That's enough, okay? That's enough. You pay them their money so they go. It's protection money. You pay them and they go away, and that's all that matters. And this particular dentist, obviously, everybody knows. We go ahead. We took we were out of discretion. We took out the name, but you probably all know who this individual was. And she was sentenced to 2 years in jail. 2 years and 5 months in jail, and fined $887,000. Probably the actual tax liability should have been higher. I don't know how many years they charged her with tax evasion for, but this is a major problem. You clearly have to pay your taxes. I probably wouldn't have even had to say anything if not for the part that this example is about a dentist in Ottawa. So, it makes perfect sense to bring it up. Most people know they have to pay their taxes. Go ahead, press the button. Oh yeah, sorry, we put this in there. This is a picture that was in the paper. My point is that we argued these things all the way up to the Supreme Court. I was in front of the Supreme Court just a few months ago, and you know what? You take your chances. I thought we had a good case, but don't say, "Oh, I'll tell it to a judge. A judge will understand." Judges don't understand. You lose, and that's the end of your practice. I mean, I don't know how some of these people that are my clients are going to recover from the mistakes that they've done, even if I can alleviate the suffering somewhat. If they've done wrong, there's only so much you can expect me to be able to do. Sometimes I work miracles, but sometimes not. So these people came to me, and they came to our firm, and this is our firm, and they said, please help me. And I wanted to run through with you some of the solutions that we had for these people, and hopefully after that, we'll have some time for questions, and we'll be able to discuss these things. How am I doing for time? Lots of time. Okay, go ahead, one me. All right, so that's me. That's not my office. That would be great if that was my office. It's not my office. It's a lot more modest than that. And this here is our first dentist. This is the first dentist that came to me, unable to sleep, and said, listen, I've simply left off my tax return $100,000. What do I do? How do I make this right without going to jail? Because that's tax evasion. Taking $100,000 off the table is tax evasion. So I said to him that what we can do is called a voluntary disclosure. It's a program designed for people that forgot to include certain amounts on their tax returns and want to come clean with the government. There are certain parameters that are appropriate. There are certain parameters that if you don't meet the qualifications, you cannot use the program. But he did, and so we told the government that, well, there was $100,000 a couple of years ago that wasn't reported. We'd like to report it now. We'd like to report it because one of the qualifications is that there's no audit underway and no impending audit. So it was fine. They took our voluntary disclosure. They said, okay, the tax at the time would have been $100,000 plus, the tax on it would have been, whatever, $40,000. Pay the tax and you're done. Now, the advantage of doing this is that you don't pay interest on the amount outstanding, and you don't pay penalties, and if you ask really nicely, you can get an abatement of interest. So that's what we did, and he did that, and he walked away happily and continued his practice. Good. Okay, so this fellow, this was the fellow who went to Montego Bay. He doesn't. We should have put him in with a 10. That would have been great. But anyways, he went on a trip. He came back with a pina colada or something. This is a serious problem, because this isn't a question of whether or not you owe the tax. He owes the tax. He knows he owes the tax. He took the money and frittered it away on a trip to Montego Bay. There's not much you can do for a fellow like that. The best I can do is I can negotiate collections. The collections people at CRA can be very tough. They've got certain mandates. They don't care if they're shutting down your practice and throwing 10 people out of work. They don't care, okay? All they want is to clear the file off their desk. Now, if you tell them I can pay the money back a year and a half, 2 years, they may be able to accept that. They won't accept more than that, and they're not going to be super nice about it either. We have had clients that have had their bank accounts seized, their corporate accounts seized. If under certain circumstances, they can send a requirement to pay to the people that owe you money. If you owe them money, they can send a letter to the people that owe you money saying, don't pay him, pay us. They can do that. We've had situations where people who were had two passports in more than one country, obviously, and the government comes along and says, well, this person has been assessed for tax. It's under discussion, of course. The person's objecting, but they have two passports. They're a flight risk. They go to court and they get what's called a jeopardy order, and they can seize your bank accounts before you've even discussed whether or not you in fact owe the money. Before it's proven that you owe the money, they can go and seize your bank accounts. So it's important that you come and you speak to us. If this happens, say, listen, what am I going to do? I've had to take a little money from CRA. I had to meet cash flow. How can I make this work? Sorry, just go back one. Okay. In this particular example, we did what we could, and he has to pay the money that he owes. There's not much, and the tax on the HST and the interest on the HST and the source deductions and whatnot adds up quickly. So it's important to be aggressive in attacking it. Go ahead. Okay, this example is very difficult. Again, this was the dentist who was involved in a fitness facility who said, I don't need receipts. Very little we can do. The matter is before the courts now, and we're going to negotiate it. Any accountants in the room? Okay, let me tell you something about accountants, okay, and auditors. They like paper. They like paper. They like things on paper. If it's not on paper, it doesn't exist. Okay? Same thing with CRA. If it's not on paper, it doesn't exist. But the same is not true of lawyers and judges. A judge will look at somebody and evaluate their credibility and say, you know what? I buy it. I buy it that this person is that stupid that they're going to give the money and not get a receipt. This person looks that dumb. That's exactly the way it would work for a judge. And the best thing that we can do then is put them in front of somebody who will evaluate their oral testimony. Speak to the partner and say, yeah, okay, everybody says that that this is true. They wanted to give the money. They have pictures of the fitness facility. Clearly it didn't just grow out of the ground. Here's financials of the fitness facility. The money had to come from somewhere. It was bleeding cash. Okay, I buy it. It makes sense. The money was there. Pick a number. Okay, I think this is what happened, and therefore we'll assess tax accordingly. We're not there yet. This thing has been sitting in abeyance because there's multiple issues, and the other issue involved thousands and thousands of people in a tax shelter, in fact, which we'll get to in a second. And so we have yet to see what's going to happen, but that's how we would resolve it. Hopefully, we'll get in front of a judge, and the judge will believe our client. Good? So, tax shelters are basically numbers. there's a couple of smart tax people out there. What they do is they say, okay, look, if we take advantage of this incentive program and people give us this money and we loan them a little money and then they pay it back, we can get them in this case, a charitable donation tax receipt that makes it all worth it. Okay, so, and in the meantime, we've just donated pencil crayons to the poor in Mali or something, and that's an actual example. So, in this case, what happened is, well, with this fellow is, he gave them $1, and he was, let's say, he got a $5 tax receipt at the end of the day. The CRA hated these programs and started reassessing all of the people involved. In fairness to the dentist involved, there was a tax opinion from a big law firm. Everyone was doing it. Everybody thought it was great. And it was only years later that the CRA came along and knocked everyone down a couple pegs. His accountant told him it was fine. There's only so much you can protect yourself. And he took the advice of others and he got burned. In this case, tax shelters actually, what they did at the time is they put aside money. This should be telling. They put aside money at the very beginning to pay the law firms they'd have to hire at the end because they knew that there was going to be problems, right? So what we did, he came to us with this issue, is we said, listen, there's no point in paying us. You've already paid for these legal services. Contact the promoter. He's dealing with the law firm in question. They've already been paid. They're handling this for everybody. And CRA has been negotiating settlements along the way. Some of the settlements are more advantageous than others. We had one set of tax shelters we dealt with that involved the donation of artwork, and we managed to get a settlement that, frankly, the CRA insisted on non-disclosure. I can't even tell you what the settlement was because we did such a good job. The CRA said he can't tell anyone about it, which I think is, frankly, absolutely terrible. I mean, as a matter of transparency in this country, that should not be allowed, but that's what happened, and so I can't tell you about it. But my point is, different settlements are negotiated based on different sets of circumstances. And so, in this case, hopefully the fellow will survive the assessment of the tax shelter, but that's dependent on his personal circumstances. Okay, so let's scroll through a little bit. Okay, so this situation was a criminal situation. Now, this again was the dentist who was charged with criminal tax evasion for simply believing that she doesn't have to pay taxes. It was more than that. She also counseled tax evasion, this whole sort of internet groups where people get online and discuss how terrible it is and how we shouldn't have to pay taxes. I don't know we don't handle criminal law. We've been involved in tax evasion trials, of course, because our clients can be charged with tax evasion. We don't handle tax evasion, but this is cautionary. Nobody wants to be charged with a criminal conviction. Nobody wants a criminal conviction. Nobody even wants to have to pay criminal lawyers. There's, of course, another famous ongoing case now. I think it's ended recently. Dentists charged with drunk driving, I mean, I happen to know the lawyer involved, and I can tell you the fees are not cheap. You do not want to get charged with a criminal charge. It's another good point about getting untied from the chair. If you pay $100,000 to a lawyer to fight a criminal charge, even if you're acquitted, it's $100,000 out of your pocket that you're going to have to make back somehow, and just means that you're stuck to the chair that much longer. And so it's hard to say always walk the straight and narrow. We all make mistakes, things happen, but there is a certain level of prudence which you can take to protect yourself from these kinds of tragedies in your life. And it's just acting responsibly. It's speaking to advisors. I know that Milan advises many dentists. You speak to these people, you say, listen, what do I do here? In some cases, nobody knows any better. You follow the advice and bad things happen. But if you act in a responsible, prudent manner, hopefully you don't come into my office and I wasn't smiling if she was crying. It was just a picture. you don't come into my office with these kind of terrible situations. And once you hit that button one more time. That's me. It's not my car. I could sit here and I could regale you with stories of soul individuals, not just dentists, that have come into our office with all sorts of problems. A lot of what lawyers speak to dentists about is planning. Say, listen, you can save money. Have an opco and a holdco, a family trust. You can do all sorts of things. You can put your intellectual property offshore. There's all sorts of structures that we've been involved with. I've done it. I've planned it. I've done it. But nothing speaks to getting untied from the chair as much as people don't understand how to plan their activities. That situations where people have done everything possible to avoid paying their fair share of tax, the tax shelters, not sending in the remittances, arguing that the Constitution doesn't even require them to pay taxes. I think in all these circumstances, it does show that there's a certain temptation that comes with the fact that we are lawyers, dentists, doctors are in the highest tax brackets, and it is a lot of money that comes out of your pockets to go for taxes. But there are better ways to save taxes, and that's really, I think, what Milan's going to talk about next, talking about proper planning, putting the money into lower tax saving, deferring tax. These are the proper kind of ways that really do untie you from the chair. You may not be saving 40% or 46% of your dollar. You may only save 20 or 26% of your dollar by planning it. But at the end of the day, the CRA is not coming to you and forcing you to pay back the tax, back interest, penalties, and keeping you tied to the chair, as in the case of my one client that I mentioned to you, who's in his 60s, tied to the chair for, perhaps the rest of his life, until he actually is unable to practice dentistry anymore. So this is the message that I wanted to convey to you. I think I left enough time for some questions, but this is really the message I wanted to convey to you. Avoid disaster. Okay? That's the message. Avoid disaster. Prudence and responsibility are keywords. Any questions? Sure.
Out of your expertise and experience, looking at the 100% population of dentists, what would be, in your opinion, the percentages of dentists that are unprepared for what you've been talking about?
That's an interesting question. I think things have changed a bit, not simply because conferences like this and people going out there and talking about it, but I think also because of changes in the tax law, which have made it a little bit less viable to go out there and get involved in these various projects. So I don't know. I think it's high, though. I don't think it's high specific to dentists. I think it's high across the board because, in law school, they never taught us how to run a practice. They never taught us take source. I'm lucky I'm a tax lawyer, frankly. I don't know how somebody has starts a real estate practice or a personal injury practice, has no idea about taxes, same as dentists would understand, hey, these are problems to avoid. But my feeling is it's high.
In my opinion, is putting yourself around advisors that are active advisors, accountants, CAs, guys like that, ladies like that, that are actually helping you, not somebody that's just doing your books. And putting, our whole thing is putting the structure, putting the lawyer, putting the accountant in, and trusting them. Don't try to skimp on fees. Because I've heard dentists say, well, I don't want to get her involved because this is, I'll get her involved later to save money. That saving money can cost you a lot.
In terms of what Glenn said, how many of us in the profession trust too much the advice we seek or don't get the right people surrounding us? Like, for example, expertise in dentistry, but when you get into business and tax matters, is choosing the right people a critical part of it? How many of these problems are caused by not aligning yourself with the right experts? And how do you find the right experts? Like,
Yeah.
It seems like most dentists or professionals wouldn't be inclined to deliberately evade taxes. I don't know if I'm speaking for anyone, but no one wants to deal with the CRA. So, I mean, how much of it is by accident, by default, or application?
It's a good question. I think it depends on the actual practice being set up and run. There's a few, in the professional world of advisors, as opposed to, let's say, people that do real things like dentists and doctors, there's it seems to be an accumulation of, let's say, a lot of dentists go to, 4 accountants in town, or 3 other advisors and 6 lawyers, or what have you, and those people develop an expertise in running certain practices and the certain problems that people face. But I think Milan's point is a very good one. You need the kind of people that are actively involved. You have a bookkeeper in your office. It's very easy to tell your bookkeeper, I've decided that we're not paying the tax installments today. The bookkeeper doesn't care, right? The bookkeeper is your employee. You pay the employee. If you tell them, listen, instead of sending $10,000 to the CRA, give it to me, they're going to listen because they have no skin in the game and they accept their paycheck. So I think the key is finding the kind of people that are involved in your operations at least once every 6 months. I use an accountant. He says, listen, let me talk to your bookkeeper once every 6 months. Let's check into things, see where things are. I think it's a wonderful approach. The kind of work that I do is, I consider myself much like a plumber, as you know. A lot of the work that lawyers do is kind of when you build your house, you need a plumber, and when the toilet overflows, you need a plumber. You don't need a plumber a lot in between. So the lawyers kind of get involved on an as-needed basis. I don't think in our line of work there's kind of a role for consistency, except when you're, let's say, faced with a tax shelter. You have a tax opinion. Somebody says, listen, I want you to get involved in this. Here's a tax opinion. A legal opinion, who are you going to take it to read? You could read it yourself. Chances are a lawyer is going to be better able to evaluate the legal opinion than somebody who hasn't been to law school. And I'll tell you right now, all of those legal opinions contain a major hole. And that hole was designed to protect the liability of the law firm. And the individual who did not go to law school, probably a lot of lawyers not involved in the area wouldn't have even realized it. The case that I argued to the Supreme Court involved a lawyer who was a family lawyer who got involved in a tax shelter program, signing charitable donation tax receipts and involved in writing the opinion that was circulated. She knew nothing about tax law. She was the cousin of the tax promoter, and she did him a favor. She charged him $1,000, reviewed a previous tax opinion. He used that legal opinion to go and solicit money from all of their friends and family, hundreds of thousands of dollars. And that they then, as part of the program, bought timeshare units in Turks and Caicos and donated them to charity. She signed the tax receipts because she was president of the charity. Now, from her perspective, this was bad news and she shouldn't have gotten involved. But the actual people that bought the tax shelters were relying on a tax opinion that they really couldn't evaluate in any real way. They saw a lawyer on it. They knew the lawyer. She was a family lawyer, but who cares? She's a lawyer. She signed it. Therefore, it's fine. So I think the key is really, you have advisors for a reason. It would have cost a lot less to have me review the tax opinion before our fellow got involved in the tax shelter. I could have told them, this is the hole right here. If this isn't sewn up, don't do it. And certainly the same thing, any accountant or lawyer, I think most people know that when you give money, you need a receipt. I mean, that example, I think, doesn't even need an advisor. That's just dumb. I didn't mean to be too harsh to dentists, but I got to tell you, I thought that the harshness had to come through. I mean, seriously, I've seen dentists come through our office. I'm sure most advisors have seen dentists come through our office with these unbelievable stories of the things they've gotten involved with. If they had done nothing, sat at home, took their paycheck home, cashed it, and be done with it after paying their taxes, they would have retired at 50. That would have been the end of the story. They would have been untied from the chair and they could have walked away. And that's really what I think the whole conference is about, and that's why I've tried to get the message through. Funny but harsh. Okay? And again, if you have any questions, feel free to give me a call.